Hello everyone. In this lecture, we will discuss in detail what is formalism. First, we will define formalism, then we will discuss the emergence of formalism. We will also discuss the key features or characteristic of formalisms. And I'll also give some practical examples of formalism. That if tomorrow you want to analyze a text, literary text, and you want to apply this as a literary theory, so it will be just a piece of cake for you. Let's begin and learn formalism as a literary theory. Introduction. Setting the stage. Imagine you walk into a museum. You see painting, there is painting. You see vivid colors there in that painting, sharp contrast and unique pattern. These all things you observe where in a museum. Now, instead of asking that who painting this, right? Who is the painter? You're not asking this question because you're not interested in this question. Or what was the painter's life like? You're not interested in the life, in the history, and the context of the painter, right? This is not your interest, you ask. So, how are the brush strokes arranged? You're interested in this. You ask what? That how are the brush strokes arranged and how do the colors balance each other? What makes the painting beautiful on its own terms? So these are the questions you ask. You're not interested that who made this painting. You're not interested in the life's history of the painter, right? Of the artist. What you are interested, the brushstrokes, how they are arranged, and how do colors balance in this painting, and what makes the painting so beautiful and unique. So if you are interested in such things, so it means that you are or we are referring to formalism. We will discuss this on the next slide. So that is formalism in literature. When you are not interested in authors, right? That who wrote this piece of text, who's the author of this text, of this novel, of this poem, of this short story, and you are not interested that what was the life, the history, the context, right? So what you are interested that how these words are arranged in a poem, in a novel, in a drama, what literary figures are used. Okay? For example, simile, metaphor, sound pattern, repetition. So you are interested in such thing. So it means, okay, that you are focusing on the text independently. You are keeping aside who the author and author's life. So formalism, it tells us forget about the author's life, right? That how he spent or she spent life. What was the political situation that time? You're not interested in history. Forget about the history or politics for a moment. Look at the text itself. What the text says, that is the focus of your interest. So the form, what is the form, right? What is the form? When we say form, so we are asking about the structure, how these words are arranged, are structured. So you are interested in a language, right? What metaphor, simile, and literary devices are used in this text. So you are searching in meaning where? In language, in form, okay? The meaning derives from the form, from the language, from the text itself, not from the author's life, from the history, from the politics, right? So you are interested in the structure of a language, the form of the language itself. That's where meaning lives. So formalists, they think that meanings of a text resides where? In the language itself, in the structure itself, in the form of a language, not in author's biography, not in author's history, not in author's life. So, what is formalism? We continue. It is a 20th century literary theory developed mainly in Russia. That's why sometimes it's called Russian formalism. And who are the name of in the development of this theory? That is, first one is Victor Shklovsky. Victor Shklovsky and Roman Jacobsons and Boris Akhnebom, right? And later in America, when it arrived to America, it got the name of new criticism. So we will discuss in the next lecture the difference between new criticism and Russian formalism. But right now we can say that when this Russian formalism arrived to America, it got the name of new criticism or new critics. So in the new critics, we have Clean Brooks, we have John Crevey, we have Ransom's W.K. Wimsett. So key idea of formalism is literature is spatial because of its form and use of language. What is in the form? When we say form, so we're talking about the language. And the use of language not because of the author's intention or historical background. So they keep aside historical backgrounds and author's intention before formalism. The literary critics focus what? On the author's background, on the author's intention, right? On the historical background of the author, the political and social situation of the author. Now they say forget about such things. What is important? That is the text itself. Now formalists say literature is autonomous, right? It can be studied on its own. Autonomous means that you are focusing on the text. And when you chain it, when you linked it with the author's biography, with the author's intention, so then literature is no more independent. So they say that literature is autonomous and it can be studied on its own. The focus of the Russian formalist is on literariness. Now, what is literariness? That the language of literature is different from ordinary or scientific language. So they focus on literariness. That is style, imagery, sound, rhythm, narrative techniques. Right? So in literariness, we find the style of a text. We discover imageries used in text and what is the sound pattern in the text, the rhythm, the narrative, techniques used by the author. Right? So this makes a text literary. Or we find literariness. So literariness, that the language of literature is different from ordinary or scientific language. So in literary language or literariness is the style, imagery, sound, rhythm, narrative, techniques, blah, blah. So second feature, they focus that is close reading, analyzing how words, sentences, metaphors, and structure work together to create meaning of the text. Right? So they're not waiting, they're not waiting or to look at the author's intention, historical background. So what they are analyzing the text by looking the words, sentences, metaphors, structures, and how they work together to create meaning of the text. So core concept in formalism. The first concept in formalism we can find that is defamiliarization. Right? Defamiliarization is also known as Austinians. So Victor Shklovsky is there. So defamiliarization was introduced in literature by Victor Shekelowski, right? So it says that literature makes the familiar seem strange. So, what does defamiliarization? Something that the audience are already aware of, something that the audience are already familiar with. So, a literary person or the author, right, or a writer or a poet is going to defamiliarize it, right? So, and how can we make something defamiliarize, right? That is through deviation, through parallelism, right? And by using metaphors, personification, hyperbole, synecdoche, imagery, tone. So these are the things which make the text defamiliarized. So something that the audience are already familiarized. So these writers are going to defamiliarize. So what is the purpose of defamiliarization? The purpose is that the audience will take interest and it will give a fresh and a new perspective to the text, right? Because something you are already familiar with. You're writing a sentence, subject, verb, object, that is familiar one. So a poet comes and he, because poets have got a license, so they are going to break these rules. First they're going to put, for example, the object, then subject, and then verb. They might begin a sentence with a preposition. They might begin a sentence with an adjective, right? So by we can say that restructuring these sentences. So you are going what? You are going to defamiliarize the text. So this will make the audience will take interest. So for example, instead of the sun set, a poet might say the sky burned itself into darkness. So this is okay when you say that the sun set. This is a normal routine, right? This is, we can find such structure in ordinary conversation or might be in article or academic language. The sun set. But a poet might say that the sky burned itself into darkness. So this is, you are going to make something defamiliarize. This is the first example of defamiliarization. So something you are already, because you are familiar with the sunset, but you are not familiar with that the sky burned itself into darkness. So the sky burned itself into darkness and the sun set are the same, right? But this is defamiliarization. Second, that literary devices, metaphor, irony, symbolisms, and paradox, and rhyme and rhythm, that these things make a text defamiliarize. Because you're using personification, you're using hyperbole, you're using metaphor, right? You're using rhythm, rhyme. So this will make, okay, your language, this will create literariness also, and will create your language, or to give your language a fresh look, a new look. Now, for example, Shakespeare's in Sonnet 18 says that beauty lies in metaphor and rhythm. So, in Shakespeare in Sonnet 18, he says that beauty lies where? In metaphor and rhythm. How? When he says, like, for example, that shall I compare thee to a summer day? Right? So, here he is talking about the how beauty lies in metaphor and rhythm. 3. Unity of the text. So will a woven fabric everywhere contributes. So there's unity of text, the focus is there. And then the intentional fallacy, don't ask what the author intended. So they're not going, because the author might have gone or did 3, 4, or 5 centuries ago. So how can we go deep into the mind of the author that what he meant by this word, by this text? Not possible. So they say that forget about author's intention. They are focusing unity of the text, how words and sentences are used together to give meaning to the text, and the intentional fallacy that is rejected. Similarly, the effective fallacy is also rejected, because if you have a professional like reader, and he is going to interpret the text, and he tell us, okay, that this word mean this or this text mean this. So the reader, the professional reader, might like or dislike a writer or the author. For example, that if I like Shakespeare, so I may praise him, I may praise Shakespeare. Or if I don't like Shakespeare, so I may have some negative remarks about Shakespeare. So that's why that effective fallacy will also, they reject effective fallacy, right? Effective fallacy mean that as a reader you may have you may find some merits because you like the writer, you like the author. Or you, there might be some merits, but because you don't like Shakespeare, so you will just identify some demerit in the work of Shakespeare. So forget about effective fallacy and forget about intentional fallacy. So don't rely on how the reader feels, because if you as a reader have some love and respect for an author, so you might praise. And if you don't have love or affection for that writer, so you might go and you might find some fault in that writing. So that's why these both concepts are rejected by formalists. Why formalism is fascinating? It makes reading literature as an art of discovery. That's why that it fascinates us. Encourages looking at patterns, repetitions, and contradictions, right? So formalism encourages looking at patterns. What pattern is used? What is the arithmetical pattern, sound pattern, sentence structure, and repetitions, because musicality is there, and contradiction. So this is the focus of formalists. Literature becomes like a puzzle solved by analyzing its piece. So this become a puzzle, and they are going to analyze its different pieces. Some practical example of Robert Frost. Stopping by words on a snowy evening. Whose words these are, I think, I know. His house is in the village, though. So we can find some repetition of sounds, like for example that no, though, and one is no, one is though. Okay. If there is another one, okay, we will discuss on this slide. Formalist reading, a repetition of sound like no, though, and snow. So snow is not here. Okay, so we have some sounds like oh, like in snow, like in though, and like in no. No, though, and snow. That is the repetition of sound, which creates musicality. So this is the job of formalist. Say this, they say meaning derives from here. And rhythm, like iambic tetrameter use, gives hypnotics. Walking piece is there. So this is the rhythm. Rhythm is used in this poem, that is iambic tetrameter. And iambic tetrameter gives what? Hypnotic walking piece. And final line, and miles to go before I sleep. Ambiguity comes from structures and repetition. And miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Practical example to Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? is the east and Juliet is the sun. So is really Juliet is the sun? Juliet is not the sun, but it is used as a metaphor. Metaphorical language is used here. So formalist reading, Juliet is not literally the sun, but the metaphor creates defamiliarization by using metaphor, as before I discussed. Imagery of light versus darkness is a structural device, so meaning emerges from poetic devices, not Shakespeare's personal life or his intention or affective fallacy. Practical example number third, compare the cat sat on the meat. So this will be ordinary language or academic language, you can write this. But in poetic or literature, we write upon the mat recline the cat. So this is defamiliarization. So formalist view both mean the same. These both mean the same. Formalist view, so both mean the same literally. They literally both mean the same. But the second is literally because it's unusual arrangement of defamiliarize the ordinary. So ordinary structure is not used here. This is defamiliarization. And this kind of language is used in literature. This is okay what they call literariness. Strength of formalism makes student focus on the text itself, not outside, and provides tool for close reading. You're going to read between the lines and helps appreciate the beauty of language itself, not the author's life or his intention. Limitation of formalism, ignore history, culture, and politics. These are also important when you are analyzing a text, because it's important when you focus that when Shakespeare was writing, so what was the history that time, what was the culture, prevailing culture that time, and what kind of politics was going on that time. Because the meaning also derived from such things, but formalists do not agree with this. So this is okay limitation. Sometimes treat literature as a close box. They do not look outside of, because it's close reading. And does it explain why certain forms emerge in certain times? Why certain forms like metaphor, these repetitions, sound pattern emerge in certain times. So these are the limitation of formalism. Why students should care? Formalist sharpens analytical skill. You think critically, look at the text. Second, foundation of many modern approaches like stylistics and structuralism lies in formalist analysis, and teaches you to see literature differently, not as a mirror of reality, but the crafted art. In conclusion, we can say that formalists ask us to fall in love with the text itself, not outside. It whispers, don't look outside the window of the poem, look at the glass, the frame, and the color, rather than outside. So we can conclude by these remarks that reading as a formalist decoding sound, rhythm, imagery, and structure. And final hook will be that next time you pick up a poem, so don't Google the author's biography. Instead, ask why this word, not author. Why this word, not another one? Why the writer used this word? Why not another one? Because meaning derives from here. Why this rhythm and this metaphor? Why not some others? So what happens if I read it as an art, not as a diary? So that was all about formalism. In the next lecture, we will differentiate. There's a little bit difference between new criticism and Russian formalism. So please keep watching and enjoy learning literature and linguistics with Discuss and Discover with Dr. Imran. Please do provide your valuable comment in comment sections and I'll answer all your questions. Thank you so much.